Welcome to Mazungumzo, African Scholarly Conversations, a podcast that highlights the perspectives of various stakeholders in academia and research fields across Africa through open dialogue or Mazungumzo on scholarly communication in Africa.
Welcome to Mazungumzo, African Scholarly Conversations. We are joined by an expansive list of African policymakers, science communication specialists, innovators, and tertiary institution leads who contribute to this realm of science communication. I'm your host today, Joy Owango, the Executive Director of the Training Center in Communication. This week's guest is Mr. Bonface Nyagah, a program manager and capacity building specialist with over 18 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. He's the capacity building officer for the Regional Scholarship and Innovation Fund, RSIF, at ISIPE, where he implements the RSIF capacity building strategy and coordinates capacity building efforts for PhD scholars in African host universities. ISIPE is Africa's largest entomological research center based in Nairobi, Kenya. Bonface also serves as the safeguarding officer for the project and supports the establishment of collaborations with international partners. Welcome to the program, Boniface.
Thank you so much, Joy, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It is a pleasure to have you here. Now, tell us about your career, tell us about the background and tell us about the background to your career and the path to your current position.
Many thanks, Joy. It's a pleasure again. Indeed, it's been quite a career path for me. Originally, I was trained as a production engineer. And when I finished that, then, of course, as an engineer, you start looking for work, engineering related work, but this was not forthcoming. So somehow through a friend, I stumbled onto the German Academic Exchange Service, who had just gotten a vacancy, and the vacancy was for an assistant administrator. So I joined the German Academic Exchange Service, the regional office for Africa, which is here in Nairobi, as an assistant administrator, doing support, supporting those program officers who are running with the programs, the various programs that the DAAD in Nairobi then was doing. And while there, of course, I was interacting with lots of academics. For the first time in my life, I would see and meet vice chancellors up close. And Joy, you don't know what those things do to you when you meet a professor who you only saw on the news or read on the newspaper, and they're standing in front of you. You're shaking their hand.
Eh?
Yeah, you're listening to their story. And that kind of rekindled the hunger I had before I did the engineering to kind of pursue something that would be enabling me to have a bit more impact. Because I must say the engineering had a lot of influence from my parents, especially my father, who is an engineer and has always been an engineer. Even in retirement, he's an engineer. And now I saw this is a space where I can think, I can interact with people, I can see what a program is and how it's moving and how people are kind of coming out of that whole pipeline. So, and of course, I must say I had very encouraging colleagues there, and they would even allow me to kind of shadow for them when they're on leave, and they would give me instructions on what to do. And they were kind of inducting me slowly into program management.
Right.
And I wouldn't say I was seeing it, but perhaps they were seeing it better, and they would leave things in my hands. I would be put as the out of office person for their various roles. And then down the line, I think I did that for about 4 years. One of the colleagues there then kind of needed to move on in life to something else. And I remember having a conversation with her in one of those kind of last annual cocktails, and she called me aside and we're having a side chat, and she revealed to me something that had been going on, and I didn't know that she was leaving. And she told me in her kind of departure interview and all this, she had been asked if she knew somebody or could propose someone who could be kind of recruited to this. On top of her head, she just said me. She said my name. And you know, those things, Joy, are key when people speak your name in rooms when you're not even there.
True.
And that for me was kind of now life-changing and career-shaping, because I remember not so long after she left, I was called in by the then director, and the director mentioned to me this whole story again, that the colleague is leaving and so on. She asked me if I knew, and I said, yeah, I've been informed that she's leaving, and of course that's normal life, that people move on to other things. And then she said, well, she recommended you for this position that she's leaving vacant, and I don't know if you're interested. And this for me was, I think, the one very critical question that anyone has ever asked me in my career, if I'm interested in a higher position with higher responsibility. So of course I took it, and the director was graceful enough, even said she will allow me 6 months to try it. If I don't if I feel it's too much, you know, we can discuss, or maybe I can just go back to my other job and they can recruit someone. And well, the rest is history.
So you took the challenge.
Going back. I took the challenge, and I of course, this comes with a bit of more income. So I said, well, I might as well use this extra income to get me, you know, a training that is not engineering, that is more inclined to this work.
Okay.
And I dived again into a degree program, a part-time degree program, where I would, you know, do my work at the end of the day, attend class, and I was doing that faithfully until I came out of it. So I'm sure on this podcast you can allow me, since it's about higher education, I can say I graduated from Strathmore University in Kenya.
Fantastic.
And I did a Bachelor of Science in Management and Leadership. So that kind of placed me in a good position, because and it was a double major, and I majored in management of non-profit organization and in public administration. So then that way I felt also kind of this synchronized me pretty well into program management. All the while, actually, I was managing a program for scholarships, postgraduate scholarships. So the whole value chain of a scholarship program, from, you know, calls to advertising to marketing to handling applications and then awarding, onboarding, you know, maintaining those scholars until we kind of hand them out as alumni when they finish their either PhD or their masters. However, a couple of years down the line, I think, if I'm not wrong, it could have been back in 2008, the German government then, because then DAAD is from Germany, there came a minister. I think it would be equivalent of a minister of the interior. And of course, they were visiting the nation, they visited the presidency, and all those kind of protocol that can happen when a higher ranking official of a government visits another government. And then there was a pronouncement that Germany wanted to give, I think, 1,000 postgraduate scholarships to Africa. And this was a program that would run for a couple of years. And by 1,000, I mean 1,000 postgraduate scholarships annually. In Africa. So this was quite huge when you think of 1,000 for sub-Saharan Africa. So, of course, then the political side of things ended, and then the nuts and the bolts was now, where will the 1,000 go? And of course, he also announced that DAAD was squarely in charge of these scholarships. So then that boiled down to 300 postgraduate scholarships in East Africa.
I was
So
about
this
to
is
ask
roughly,
that. So that is just East
yeah,
Africa. So this is, for context, this is the famous DAD scholarship program that postgraduates, competitive scholarship that postgraduates or early career researchers in East Africa compete for, right?
exactly. It's called the in-country program.
Right.
So it's called in-country because you study in your country or within the region. So
the region being East Africa.
East Africa, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it was allowed that a fraction of those could go across. Maybe a Kenyan goes to Tanzania, a Tanzanian goes to Uganda, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And you realize that was about a third of those scholarships coming then to East Africa. And that meant to my desk. So I was being graduated from an intake of 30 postgraduate scholarships to 300. So I could say 1,000%. Yeah. So and then of course we sat with management, and they are very kind managers there. And there was an in-depth discussion on how this would be managed. Now that we were responsible for not just Kenya as individuals, program officers, but also for the East Africa region.
Right.
So, and you can see now my career was now growing, and I had to now start managing not only a bigger portfolio of scholarships, but also a few other institutions that are not necessarily in Kenya. And even now there was a team that I had to take lead of.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So hold on. So now here you are working with these postgraduate students for East Africa, Eastern Africa. I'm assuming it's East Africa or Eastern Africa?
It is Eastern Africa because also
beyond
Ethiopia
the East African
was kind
community.
of Ethiopia was within our kind of space, a bit of the South Sudan, though then they were still kind of bringing it all together. Yeah, South Sudan, yeah.
So now, so when this minister said that he wanted at least 1,000 PhDs coming out of Africa every year, you already had a portion of 300, and I'm assuming other DAD officers had their own targets to meet as well.
Yes, actually, they were not just PhDs; they were both PhD and masters. Yeah. So, I mean, give and take, I would say then, at least then, if I remember clearly, the ratio was something like maybe 2/3 were masters and a third maybe PhD.
Okay.
And I say that loosely,
yes, okay.
because it could have been anything between 50% aside or towards 2/3, 1/3.
Right.
However, yeah, as you say, this now came to be managed here in Nairobi, 300 of those annually.
Right.
So every year we would advertise together with my team that I was team leader, and of course with the support of the management here in the DAD office in Nairobi. 300 postgraduate scholarships, and we would work towards filling those positions. But I must say that filling those positions was never a challenge.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yes, it never at any one point became a challenge. Actually, we always had more applicants than are available, the slots. And every year, the quality of the applicants became better and better and better. The competition became stiffer. And I could see those selection committees getting even a much more harder time to make those critical decisions, whether to give it to Mr. X or Miss Y, you know? Yeah, so, and of course, after serving a DAD for 15 years, it came a point where I also needed to transition, and I found that place to transition to was ISIPE.
Right.
ISIPE had competitively won the management of the PASET RSIF. PASET is Partnerships for Skills in Applied Sciences, Engineering and Technology. And it has a flagship program called Regional Scholarship and Innovation Fund, which is a purely doctoral scholarship program.
Right.
So I transitioned from DAAD to I managed a similar program, and I came into PASET RSIF, where presently I work as a capacity building officer.
Okay, this is a very interesting journey. So you've been working, first of all, with the idea of supporting early career researchers and supporting their pipeline. It just goes beyond advertising and making sure that they do the program and they graduate. You mentioned that you are supporting them, you are supporting their pipeline. So in this case, it's the pipeline as they are going through their research program, so their research life cycle. So take us through what you are doing. Basically, how are you supporting the early career researchers in their research life cycle? In this case, I mean, granted, they're already working, doing their projects or doing their research, conducting their research in their respective universities, but early career researchers need support, especially when it comes to producing good quality research outputs, understanding how to be competitive post graduation, how to increase their visibility. So basically what I'm talking about is the scholarly communication aspect of it, because what I know is that during your tenure at DAD, and it's something that you've also extended to your position at the PASET RSIF program, you've been very keen on supporting early career researchers in producing good scholarly communication outputs. So take us through how that idea came about and what you have noted over the years in supporting early career researchers in improving their research output, especially those who've been funded by some of these projects. So how did this come about? Then, yeah.
Thank you so much, Joy. Indeed, you must agree with me, and perhaps even our listeners here will agree that it's one thing to want to do that PhD or to want to do that master's, MSc, MBA, or let's generally call it a postgraduate degree. But then when you're doing a postgraduate degree, it's beyond just learning how to think. It is producing knowledge. Absolutely. Discovering new knowledge.
Yes.
So, and for you to discover new knowledge sits on existing knowledge, and you use existing knowledge as a base. So that was always clear for DAD. It is clear even for RSIF, where I am at the moment, that the young researchers, they need support. And the support, I don't mean that you're paying their stipend on time or listening to their issues. You have to avail to them additional resources without the assumption that they will be given or provided for at their universities. So it calls for deliberate effort to provide this. And I remember clearly, at least in my tenure at DAAD, we used to have these conversations with the scholars just to see what challenges they are going through that are beyond, that I have my stipend, the fees is paid. But then as a person, when you're doing research, there are research-based challenges that cannot even be cured with money. What are they going through? Do they feel they are getting enough supervision, or are they being supported enough by the supervisors? Do they have access to the necessary e-resources and the e-books? Can they access any publications that they feel is right for their work? Are they able to publish? Do they even know how to publish now that it's a prerequisite before they graduate? Maybe a paper is needed, or 2. Some universities need 3. And writing the paper is also not just writing the paper. You want one with a higher impact. You want to be visible. Maybe if you are a specific type of scientist, you want to be with those scientists who are of your area of interest. And there's no way you're getting there if they are published in very high impact and you want to go to an unknown journal. How do you write to that quality that is needed? So those questions we used to have posed to the scholars, and we would discuss, and then it dawned upon us that we have to do something had to be done. So, and of course, really, I always am thankful for the management at DAAD. Then they always, and even now I see it, they have their ear on the ground. They listen to the feedback they are getting from the scholars. And I remember us, shopping around, and we were shopping around and looking, so who can deliver, this kind of thing, even on a pilot, or,
because
just to
at
have
that
a
point it was
feel.
unheard of. It was unheard of.
It was unheard of. I remember when you said science communication, people would ask, so what is this? Is it just, communicating? And, even some of those scholars, they wanted to go to an international conference. Then they are told you have to bring a poster. They didn't even know how you put together a scientific poster.
Right.
And we were shopping around and trying to find who can do this here for us in Africa. How can they deliver? And I must say, we were very happy, Joy, to have found you. And
at that point, I think we were about 5 years old.
Yes, you and the TCC group, you are there. Of course, we found a few others who also existed and we didn't know about.
Yes.
And there's even a very big one that actually trains librarians. That was why they were founded. It was called Itoka from South Africa.
Yes, yeah.
But you see them, they had a target clientele back
for just then. That's
for
true.
just training the librarians, or tooling or retooling the librarians. So there are all sorts of discussions what to do. And I think, if I remember clearly, we came to a conclusion that TCC Africa could do something, Itoka could do something, and the others who we got there, everybody could do something in a specific region. Everybody got their region, and later we would compare. As the ones in charge in DAAD, we would compare what the feedback we are getting from the scholars from one trainer like TCC and from what Itoka is saying. And we slowly, after that pilot phase, I think we came to a conclusion that TCC could do it at a larger scale. And we were happy that you guys were able to do it. And of course, that then changed a lot the whole experience of those doctoral students. You could see they become bold. They are not unsure anymore. Yes.
They're more confident. They're more confident with their work.
Exactly. They are more confident. They know what to do when they need to publish. They are not scared to publish those papers. They do it. Some of them, went over and beyond the required 2, some would do 4, others 6, name it. And of course, as you said, the visibility was key. I mean, teaching scholars how to be even visible on social media. You are now a scientist who is becoming, if you are not even there yet. How are you visible to other scientists in your area of interests? Yeah. So those things, Joy, were key, and it's something that even in my present role, I coordinate. And you mentioned it when you introduced me. We have that capacity building strategy of the RSIF, and I'm more than thrilled to implement it, because those are the very things, that we do there, so that PhD scholars or postgraduate scholars feel empowered enough and bold enough that they have the right tools. It's one thing to have a toolbox, but if it doesn't have the right tools for the right job, then it doesn't even help.
That's true.
And that's what we do. We even refer to our strategy, the capacity building strategy of the RSIF. Informally, we call it a toolbox, and we give specific tools that empower the scholars.
That's good. So basically what you've done is, beyond just offering the funding for the research, early career researchers, is also create an ecosystem, a safe ecosystem where these early career researchers are confident enough to go through their research life cycle, ask the right questions when it comes to where they need to publish, how they can improve their visibility. And that is extremely important for early career researchers as a foundation to get into the future of their careers. But then beyond that, I noted that you have another role. You're a safeguarding officer. And I'm curious to know, what does it mean to be a safeguarding officer? I know the postgraduate process is a very lonely process, okay? More so, especially if you're doing your PhD program, you're 100% of the time you'll be interacting with your supervisor. And then there are also these various cultural dynamics, gender dynamics that come to play when you're interacting with your supervisor, and also mental aspects, mental awareness that needs to be questioned or put into play when you're going through your postgraduate process. So tell me, knowing all that encompasses just going through a postgraduate degree, it's just not doing the research itself, it's what that person is going through in the back end. How does being a safeguarding officer come to play? And what does that involve, especially for these early career researchers?
Thank you, Joy. You're right. I'm also a safeguarding officer, and whenever donors put funds, there's a necessity to have a safeguarding person. And I could start a bit on the outside before I come to the higher education space. If, for instance, Joy, a donor gave funds to construct a road or a port or an airport, it means this has a social impact,
right,
both positive and negative.
Right.
It could also have an environmental impact. It could improve or destroy the environment where this is being put up. So there's always a necessity to have a safeguarding officer of safeguarding focal points, meaning these are people who offer a safe space where the constituents around a certain project or program could come and air freely without judgment their grievances. And if they are valid grievances, if they are valid issues, they can be sorted. If it is a road, maybe the road is being proposed to pass near the source of water. Maybe it's contaminating the water. Maybe us as the dwellers of this place have an issue with this. So how does that get sorted? So, and this is the same now when we come to higher education, Joy, you find that funding, yes, is given, stipends will be paid faithfully, and all the payments that should go to support the financial side of a scholarship. However, there are the soft things. For instance, if a scholar was aggrieved against their supervisor or against something that they are going through, maybe they might feel I'm doing this kind of science and my lab is really lacking, and this is causing a lot of anguish, because as much as we do science, at least the right tools require to be in place. And you find that sometimes in our universities, the tools are even there, but they are completely dysfunctional. And then sometimes you get the feeling it is known by our administration, but then nobody seems to be actioning it to sort it out. So what does a student, a postgraduate student, a doctoral student do or has to do when they are in this kind of situation? They are willing to do the work, but the machine to do it or what is needed to execute the work is not there. Then they should have that free space to be able to complain and not have any form of retaliation from the university. And we see sometimes it can happen when, say, you report your supervisor or your senior, and then they retaliate by either castigating you, or they push you aside, or they sideline you, or you walk around university and fingers are being pointed at you. Maybe you are branded an informer. So that's why then the safeguarding becomes necessary. So that's what I do, even just to check, Joy, that the student is still in the proper space of mind to be able to do that. Sometimes the scholar might feel really burnt out, and maybe they're just looking for a break. They want a break, and a real break, not just leave. Maybe maybe they want to ask for academic leave, maybe I want to stop for 9 months or what. How do we handle this? So then the safeguarding officer comes into play to help also, sometimes negotiate these things in line with the statutes of the university.
Good.
So as a safeguarding officer, I have to remain aware of what the rules are, especially postgraduate rules of the university, so that even if a scholar would like, to report something or something done to help for them to be able to work better, then everything is within those regulations. And how we do it here at RSIF is I work with my peers. Each of those host universities, African host universities, have been really, really gracious that they have identified sometimes even a very high academic who is the safeguarding focal point, meaning if a scholar is abused or aggrieved, they could rush to that one first before even reaching out to us. So we work together for the well-being of the scholars and making sure that they remain aware that there's a free space where they can rant or complain about certain issues that they feel are not moving or working towards the betterment or for them to achieve their goals in doctoral studies.
Okay, so clearly you'll get support from the doctoral students, but what about the universities? What has been their response with you coming in as a safety officer, a safeguarding officer, especially when it comes to handling some of these stealthy issues, let's say in supervision of students, a mental awareness of the students? How has it been received by some of the host universities?
I must say, Joy, they have been very, very, very open and received it with open arms, because we've realized also universities are not in the business of keeping doctoral students there. Most of them are even staff members of this university. So the sooner they can finish, the university is looking at this person as a resource. This is a resource. This is someone we want. They finish and they start teaching and supervising.
Yeah.
So they have embraced this, and this is something that really, really makes us happy. And they are very quick when there are issues. I think we have a very short turnaround time when there are issues to be sorted. They are always open to discuss. They are always open to implement whatever we agree will be done. So that kind of embracing, then it's kind of a mind shift completely, because I think in the older days, if you complained about a supervisor or about something,
you might
never finish your studies.
That was a dead man walking.
But then, this is a different way of doing things, a completely different way.
Which is good.
Yeah.
And it also says a lot about the cultural paradigm shift in Africa, because we come from a very, when I say conservative, respect your elders, and your supervisors are older than you. And because of that cultural dynamic, young early career researchers would not raise their voice, will not complain, will not raise an issue. So the fact that, and universities used to ride on that for a very long time. So the fact that you're saying this is changing, it means that the dynamics are becoming more adaptive with being cognizant on being aware of the needs of the early career researcher, just beyond just being a student, but being a person, making sure that they are able, if you think about them as a person, they're able to deliver their programs on time. Now, and that is very good. And now I will digress and ask a question ask the subsequent questions in regards to what I've observed in your career. And that is, number one, you worked for DAD, and DAD was, it's a Global North partner based in Germany, funding higher education in Africa. So which has been historical, really. Historically, the Global North has been supporting higher education in Africa, even providing the scholarships with what you're seeing with DAD. And then now you're with the PASET RSI program, which is a program which is similar to that in the sense that it is supporting doctoral students in Africa, but then it is a program that is funded by African governments. So what is your observation right now in regards to Africa's commitment to higher education, with looking at PASET RSIF as a case study? Because what we're seeing is that governments have actually contributed to this fund. Okay, they have also committed to saying to having a target of about, is it 1,000 PhDs? How many PhDs are they targeting? Yeah.
Actually, the vision is 10,000.
10,000 PhDs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, but this is a commitment by African governments, and they are paying for that. So, what is your observation with Africa's deliberate involvement in funding higher education and early careers researchers, particularly doctoral students? And what do you see it does for regionalization, where governments work together, and also internationalization, showing, highlighting to the global north what the continent is doing? So rather for us in the global south, but what we are doing in supporting the higher education sector.
Thank you, Joy. Indeed, I must say that this is first a paradigm shift, because as you rightly mentioned earlier, most African nations perhaps would get some form of funding from a partner in the north.
Yes,
sometimes the partner would follow the dollar to the ground, and maybe they would send a manager there to manage how these things are done. But then this is kind of a complete turnaround.
It's totally
First of all,
different.
yes,
yeah.
The African governments are contributing the money or the funds from taxpayers' money, which is then used to fund doctoral scholars. And in terms of the way you said regional approach, and perhaps you will also see this as you read deeper on how the PASET RSIF is made. It's a complete shift where a country contributes a set amount of funds, and then 20% of that is given to scholars who are coming from a non-contributing country, while 80% is given to nationals of the contributing country. And even better, those scholars don't have to study in their country because their country contributed, but rather they can move to any one of these host universities that make up the program. So that, when you look at it, you see there's one end where you're helping scholars from or qualified scholars from a country that are not contributing. And also your scholars are moving to other parts of Africa. So you can see that is kind of a regional thinking and regional approach. So, I mean, other than that, it's a real commitment, Joy, if you ask me, that countries have taken this upon themselves to take charge of bringing people to a doctoral education, because it's a realization that something has to be done. And I know you're a proponent of a specific percentage of GDP being used towards research.
Yes.
I mean, globally, if you look at the countries in the north, you might find they're spending maybe 1.5 to 1.7, maybe even a bit more. I don't know what the status is at the moment. Of their GDP on research. In Africa, I think it's not even close to 1% yet. So,
though they are supposed to be getting to that 1%.
Exactly. So, but RSIF is one of those kind of programs that kind of shifts this, because then, I mean, countries are contributing $2 million, Joy. So, and this $2 million, no, the $2 million is divided into 20 PhDs.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, and going by the fractions I gave you, it means they keep 18 of those doctoral students, and only 2 are funded who are not the nationals of that country that is contributing. So for me, this is a complete change of how things are done. It is a beginning, actually, if you ask me, on how things should be done, that Africa takes the reins of the knowledge economy of their economies. Yes,
precisely. They're making a deliberate effort in building their knowledge economies by investing in the higher education sector and providing funding for doctoral training and creating doctoral students. And
exactly.
What do you think is the future for such programs like the PASET RSIF? Do you see more programs coming up? I mean, initially, we had programs like the Rufaram, which was focusing on agriculture, but it is on host universities that are supporting doctoral students in agriculture. Or we have programs like the CATA program, which is focusing on health sciences. But you see, there's something unique about the PASET RSIF program because it is multidisciplinary. It's multidisciplinary, and we have governments committing to it. This is the one unique factor about it. The other programs, it's a mixed model, but this is purely continental commitment in supporting the higher education sector and doctoral training. So what do you see as the future for early career researchers in Africa, and Africa being a knowledge economy with such programs?
Well, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, if this is anything to go by, I see the future being very different. I see and imagine governments will intentionally put money where they need the knowledge economy to wake up. For example, if a country feels they need to better their agriculture, I see a situation where governments will deliberate, have doctoral scholars or postdocs or other level of researchers funded to get the knowledge and immediately to apply.
Right.
Perhaps something you had asked earlier, which I didn't shed light to, was on how such programs get the international aspect.
Yes.
Yes. So for example, what I've seen we are doing here at the PASET RSIF as we do our work is we run a sandwich program.
Okay.
So this doctoral sandwich program then allows a scholar to be in the African space. They can do their experiments here, but then they get a chance to visit another university or institutions of research, or sometimes even industry abroad. And by abroad, I mean out of Africa, or in Africa in an institution that is more at the international level.
Okay.
And they get to sit there or be there and do part of their lab work or research or writing. Even networking is key for a short period running, say, between 6 months and 12 months of their PhD program. So depending on the need. And then that for me then brings the internationalization aspect of this program into this, because what you're saying is this is a scholar who has been exposed not only to the culture in Africa, but they have also had to go to another place where perhaps they do things in a different way. It might not be necessarily the best way, but it's a different way. It's a different culture. They get to meet scientists who are in a different space, who are thinking differently, but still within that larger field of study and research. And that does something to you, Joy, when you visit another country and see how people do things, or they do things in a way that challenges how you do your things.
Yes.
Then you really start coming into that internationalization wheel.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this has been a very interesting conversation, Boniface. We could talk on and on about this. I'm really happy with the journey you've made, and I'm really excited with what you're doing at PASET RSIF, particularly with the safeguarding program, and also obviously with the scholarly communication and scholarly communication support for early career researchers. And with that, Boniface, thank you so much for tuning in, and do have a lovely day. Goodbye for now.
Thank you so much, Joy, and goodbye.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Mazungumzo podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on all our channels for more updates and for candid stories by researchers, policymakers, higher education leaders, and innovators on their journeys. See you in our next episode.